Hi, I'm Gina. Welcome to my studio. I'm glad you could join me. In this video, I'm going to share with you the process that I use to create an orchid out of colored pencil. I'll be working on white 90-pound Stonehenge paper here behind me. And then I also have a variety of Prismacolor Premier pencils that I'll be working with, and also one Derwent Color Soft pencil, and this one is Deep Fuchsia. Now the specific colors of the Prismacolor pencils I'll try to share with you as I use them on the paper in case you're interested. I also have on hand today some clear Scotch tape that I'll be using if I need to lift off any mistakes that I might happen to make. And I'll use that in conjunction with just a regular drawing pencil to lift those errors off the paper. As you can see here, I've got a start on a drawing that I've been working on, and I've got two orchids pretty well finished. I've got one more that I'm going to make, and it's going to go down here in the lower corner of the drawing. I also have on hand a reference photo that I'll be working from and referring to quite a bit. Now these are a photo of some orchids that I have growing here at my house, and then behind it I have a Celtic cross design that I've created, and I've used Photoshop to layer those two images together and print out just one reference photo. So come on in, take a closer look, and let's get started. Okay, so here's a close-up view of my drawing, and hopefully you can see the purple petals that have been outlined here. I also have the back petals outlined in a cream, which I would imagine is a little bit hard to see at the moment, but that'll get better as we keep working here. So the first thing I'm going to do is to cover up the lower right-hand corner of my drawing with a paper towel, just so that I don't accidentally smudge any of that color and contaminate another area, or have the oils in my skin kind of lock those colors in place. So we're going to protect that area with just a regular old paper towel. I'm going to start by working on this center back petal. I kind of like to work back to front in my artwork, or as I'm producing each part, and so I'll start with that one. As you may know, colored pencil is a transparent media, and so to take the most advantage of its transparent qualities, I like to work in really light layers, alternating colors, and allows it to build to a really rich, deep, beautiful color, but it does take a little bit of patience, so hopefully you'll enjoy the process as much as I do here. So I'm going to start with just a plain white Prismacolor pencil, and I'm going to put a layer of white down on this back petal, as it needs to be a really, really light color. As you can see in this image right here, this is the orchid that we're working on, and this is the petal that I'm getting ready to do. So it's got that really light base color that's kind of a cream tone. So I'm going to start with the white first. I'm going to make sure my pencil is fairly sharp so that it will get down into the tooth of the paper a little better and start to fill some of that in for us. Okay, so sharpen that white pencil, and just going to put kind of a medium pressure down on that paper using very tight circular motion to fill in the petal. Okay, so now that I've got a layer of white on this center petal here in the back, I'm ready to go ahead and start using the cream colored pencil. And this is, as you can see here, just a Prismacolor Premier cream color 914. Again, I'm going to just continue with a very kind of medium pressure, medium to light pressure, and circular motions. Again, real small circles, so you get a nice even application there. I don't get a buildup of too much color in one spot. And I'm going to take this over the whole petal. Okay, so now that I've got that layer of cream on this middle petal, I'm going to go back in with another layer of white, again still keeping a medium to light pressure and using mostly the point of the pencil to help fill in the tooth of the paper as we go. So again, here we go with one more layer of white. Okay, so I've got that second layer of white down now, and the next thing I want to do is just put down a very, very, very pale shade of purple on this petal, just to give it a little hint of some of that color. And to do that, I'm going to use the Lavender Prismacolor Premier colored pencil. And I'm going to hold this pencil a little bit differently. I'm going to put it between my two fingers here, like so that I can get the colored part of the pencil a little bit more flat or parallel to the edge of the paper. It does a couple of things. First, it helps me to refrain from putting too much pressure on here, but it also helps with a nice even application. And still, again, going to use a tiny circular motion and the very lightest pressure I can here, because I don't want too much color, just a little hint of that purple. The gal that I learned how to do colored pencil from is Ann Crone from Friends University there in Wichita. I took a class with her one summer, and she likened the pressure here to a whisper. So you're just kind of whispering this pencil over the paper. She said if you imagine that pressing as hard as you can is a shout, you want just the opposite of that, which is just a real light pale whisper here. So again, tiny circular motions, holding the pencil at the back to help alleviate the tendency to press too hard, and just a real gentle glide over the top of that paper, tiny little circles. Nice even layer of pencil. Okay, so now that I've got that light layer of the lavender done, I'm going to go back in with my white colored pencil again and put another layer of white on using the same steps we've been doing. I'm going to put a little heavier application here though than I did with the lavender. Now these layers of white and cream, I've been pressing harder than I would in most drawings just because these petals are so pale white that there's really not a whole lot of room to work in many other colors like you typically would. Using colored pencil if you were doing, say, an apple or a yellow flower or something like that. You want to layer in analogous colors, which are those colors that are beside each other on the color wheel. And here in a little bit we'll do some of that as we get to the purple petals, and we'll also start layering in some complementary colors, which of course are colors opposite each other on the color wheel, to help create some shadows. So in this case, I'll be using purple and yellow, that combination, to layer together to help make some shadows, as well as a little bit of gray and some blue in here as needed. Okay, so now that I have that layer of white over the lavender color, I'm ready to start looking at where my values are, highlights and shadows and those types of things. And we're going to take a look at the shadows first. Now, as I look at my reference photo here, I don't see a lot of big value change here or little shadows underneath the edges of the front two petals, but I'm going to go ahead and use my artistic license and put a few shadows in those locations just to help add a little bit more depth and definition between the petals. So to start with, I'm going to use Prismacolor's Grade Lavender pencil. And then after that, I will be using Prismacolor's True Blue pencil. Now this one I'm going to be really careful with because it's a bit of a strong color and I want just a light shadow, nothing too bold at this point. So again, starting with the Grade Lavender and using tiny circles again, I'm just going to put the hint of a shadow here at the edges of my front petals. Going to extend that shadow out just a little bit here at the curve of that front petal, just so it's not extremely uniform all the way through and looks like an outline, so we really don't want that. We want something a little more natural looking. And I think I will leave the top edge of that petal without a shadow. And I can always come back and add it in there a little bit later if I feel like I need to, but at this point I think we're going to be okay. So I'm going to take the Grade Lavender then over here on the edge of the second petal on the left. Again, tiny circles, fairly light pressure, and again, going to make it a little wider there at the dip of that petal. Hopefully this is showing up in the video so you guys can see it. Okay, so next I'm going to go in with that True Blue color we talked about, and here again it needs to be extremely light. So I'm going to hold it between my two forefingers again with my thumb on the edge here, get that colored part of the pencil parallel to the edge of the paper, and just the gentlest whisper I can come up with here, just barely gliding that pencil over the surface of the paper. And same thing on the opposite side. Okay. Alright, I think I'm going to take my white colored pencil next and go over those shadows just to tone them down a little bit. Okay, and that blue is still sticking out a bit more than I would like for it to, so a couple of things I can try here. First, I think I'm going to try a little Grade Lavender back over the top of that, and if that doesn't work, I can always lift it off with my Scotch tape and try it again. But let's see what this Grade Lavender does first. Okay, so I think that shadow's still sticking out a little bit more than I would like for it to. So we'll just try it again. So at this point, I'm going to show you the lifting method that I like to use. So here I'm using just some clear Scotch tape. I'm going to take off a chunk. And I have a 2H drawing pencil in my hand, but I've also been known to use HBs or whatever. It really doesn't matter. You're going to just, I like to keep my finger on the edge of the Scotch tape just a little bit so it doesn't completely stick to the paper, and just very lightly lay it over the area where you want to do some lifting. And then I'm going to take the tip of my drawing pencil here and press on that Scotch tape the area that I want to lighten or lift color off of, and then carefully peel that up. And it kind of lightens it a little bit, and then move it to a clean area. And just repeat that process, help pull some of that color up. And that's working real nicely for me and doing what I want. So continue that process here on the right hand side. And just rotate your tape to get to a clean area of the tape where it can pull up some more pencil for you. And get a new piece as needed. Okay, so I got a little bit more blue here than I'd like, so we'll take that off. Okay, that's looking better. All right, so I'm going to take my white colored pencil again and go back in here and just kind of even this out a little bit. And you can still see a hint of that blue in there, which is good. That's kind of what I wanted. Okay, I'm going to take the gray lavender one more time and just even out that shadow a little bit so the color's not splotchy. Okay, so that's looking better, I think. A little bit more subtle. Not quite as harsh as it was before. Okay then, so my next step, I think I'm ready to go ahead and start putting in the colored veins here. So I will be using the lavender colored pencil again to start with, and then I will be going in with some darker colors as well, like Prismacolor's Mulberry, and let's see, possibly the Dahlia Purple as well. So, but again, we're going to start with the lavender color. And here's where I'm going to really want to pay close attention to the direction of the lines in my reference photo. Hopefully you can see it there. And very lightly, just start the edge of my first line. And I want to be extra sure that I get the curves of these lines correct, because that will help to make the flower petal look a little more three-dimensional and lifelike there. And as I'm drawing this, I noticed that there is this yellow part of the petal down here as it meets the center of the orchid that I'm going to need to go back in and do. But we'll go ahead and finish getting the lines of the petals drawn on first. Real lightly up here, it doesn't show up very much in the photo. And I will come back in and do the little spider veins, or whatever you want to call those, here in just a little bit. Those little squiggles. Okay, and then I'm also going to go ahead and lay in the purple splotches here at the outside edge of the petal. Again, just very lightly so I can make corrections if I need to. And also because I'm going to layer several different colors of purple together just to help make it look a little more rich and interesting. One of the things that I really like about doing flowers is, you know, if you happen to get a line just a little bit off or a splotch not exactly the same, it really doesn't matter and it works out okay because, you know, each flower is different. So as long as you get the basic form correct and basic direction of those lines, it, you know, you can be a little, it can be a little forgiving for you if you happen to not get a line exactly where it needs to go, or if you want to change it for that matter. It's a lot of freedom there, which I like. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and start putting in the little yellow here at the very base of this petal. so that I don't forget to do it. I'm going to use the yellow chartreuse Prismacolor pencil next to do that. And again, this color can be a little bit powerful, so I'm just going to real lightly, with my colored part parallel to the paper, just kind of lightly start to put that in there. Okay. And then I'm going to go over that with the Deco Yellow. Again, light pressure, tiny circles. Okay, and then I'm going to soften that with a little bit of white. I'm using some fairly firm pressure on it at this point with the white, just to help soften that. Okay. So next step, I'm going to take the Prismacolor Mulberry colored pencil and go over the veins that I just drew. And you'll notice in the reference photo, some of them are darker and some of them a little lighter, so I'm going to kind of pay attention to that as I'm drawing here to make sure that I'm going to replicate real life here. And as I'm looking closely at each line, I notice also that some of them are thicker than others in places. So I want to make sure I try to repeat that in my drawing as well. Okay, so now I'm ready to go over some of these purple veins or lines that need to be a little bit darker, and to do that I'll be using the Dahlia Purple next. Okay, next step, I'm going to take the dark purple now and go over again the areas that need to be a little darker on those purple veins. Okay, so my next step on this petal is going to be to take the Deco Yellow colored pencil, and I'm going to go over a few of my purple lines here in some places to help tone that purple down just a little bit. It's a little bit bright, so we're going to lower its intensity just a little with mixing a complementary color with purple. And of course, yellow and purple are opposites on the color wheel, and that's how we know that they are complementary colors. I'm using a fairly firm pressure here and the very point of my colored pencil. As you can see, this, hopefully anyway, this yellow is starting to give the purple a little bit of a brownish tone, just to kind of tone it down a little bit, which is exactly what I was looking for and hoping it would do here. Okay, next I'm going to take the grayed lavender pencil again and put a little bit more of a shadow on the edges of my yellow section of this petal here, just to help it look a wee bit more rounded. Okay, I think the last thing I'm going to do on this petal is to take the cream colored pencil and add a few more areas that are just a slightly bit brighter yellow in there, just to kind of match what we're seeing in the reference photo. We'll add a little bit more interest and variety to that petal. Okay, so I think I'm pretty well finished with this petal, at least for now, and I can always come back in and add some more or change some things if I find a need to as I'm working on the other petals and seeing how it balances out. So the next step I'm going to do is to do these other two back petals down here that are pretty much the same as this top one. I will be repeating the same process that I did here, so we'll just do a time-elapse video there for you. And y'all, please notice that right here on these other two petals, it gets pretty yellow in under here. Okay, so I'll be using the cream and the Deco Yellow a little bit more, and you'll notice that the spots there again have a bit of that brownish tone to them. So we'll achieve that by layering the purple and yellow complementary colors together. So here we go. So at this point I'm ready to start working on the purple petals and parts of the orchid. I'm going to start with the Derwent Color Soft Deep Fuchsia color. And again, we're going to hold it on its side just like I've been doing in between those two forefingers with my thumb to help keep the colored part of the pencil parallel to the paper and to facilitate just a smoother application of color and very, very lightly so that we can put more layers on there. Okay, so again, just a tiny little circular movement. Keep that pencil as parallel to the paper as you can and just let it kind of glide over the surface, whispering that color onto the paper. And as we do this, I'm going to layer some analogous colors in here with the purple. So of course, analogous colors are the colors that are beside each other on the color wheel. Usually in 3s or 4s you use them. So in addition to purple, I'll be putting some pink tones in there and some blue tones. And then we'll also be utilizing again the complementary colors, which are opposites on the color wheel, to do shadows. So with the purple then I will be layering yellow in there. Now with colored pencil, you always want to start with the local color first. And of course, as you may know, the local color is just the color that we identify an object as being. So a red apple's local color is red. You know, this part of the orchid that I'm working on, its local color is purple. So you always start with that, a layer of that first. And then of course start layering in some of the analogous colors. Okay, so we've got a layer of the deep fuchsia in there. And so next I'm going to take the Process Red Prismacolor and do a light layer of that. Again, I'm going to hold it between those two forefingers and just keep that light circular motion, gentle pressure, and just give it a little bit of a warmer tone here. So as you can see, you know, colored pencil is not a real fast process, but for me, it's just a really rewarding one because it gives such rich, beautiful color when you're all done. And I've taken the time to put all those layers on there. Allows you to create some really rich and beautiful colors. Okay. Next, I'm going to put a layer of Mulberry, Prismacolor Mulberry down. Okay, and then I'm going to start looking at highlights and shadows. So I'm going to deal with the shadows first and address that first. So I'm going to take the Deco Yellow, and here on the right hand side of the orchid is where the shadow needs to go. You can hopefully see it here in the photo. So we're going to put a layer of that yellow in there. Again, lightly. We don't want, you know, a bold yellow sticking out from under our purple, but just enough to help tone down that intensity a little bit and cast a little bit of a shadow there for us. And we can darken it up here as we go, and we'll do so with a little bit of blue and some darker purples as well. Okay. And then I'm going to take a little bit of white here and start to put in a little bit of the highlights that we can see here towards the top. My white's getting short enough that I'm going to switch to using a pencil extender here shortly so that I can continue to get the most out of this colored pencil. So just a little tip for you as your pencils get short, if you don't have one already, you might invest in a pencil extender. Really nice to have that long handle to keep working with as your pencils get short. Okay. So next I think I'm going to go ahead and put in a layer of True Blue. Again, this is a powerful color, so I'm going to use it on its side and very, very lightly because I don't want to overwhelm the purple with that cool blue tone. Just enough to add some interest and to help with the shadows a little bit. Okay, next I'm going to use a Dahlia Purple. Okay. And then I think I'm going to use a little bit of China Blue here to darken up the shadow side of the orchid. Again, lightly, because I don't want that blue to stand out, but just enough to help enhance the color and darken the shadow. There we go, there's the dark purples. I'm going to use that one next. I'm going to push just a little more firmly over here on the shadow side just to get a little more of this darker tone on the paper there on the shadowed side of that part of the orchid. And I'm going to take a little bit of black grape in here next. Ideally with colored pencil you want to continue to layer until you pretty well fill in most of the tooth of the paper. And hopefully you can see in the video here the little white parts that are showing through the color, that's the tooth of the paper that hasn't been filled in yet. So often takes several layers to get that filled in, and then towards the end then I will also use a colorless blender to help push that pigment together and to kind of mash the tooth of the paper together. Gives it a nice finished shiny look and gets rid of any of the white paper that's showing through yet that you haven't quite filled in. Now, you know, using the pencil on the side as we're doing here also kind of keeps the pencil from, or the color from getting into the tooth of the paper a lot. And I'm doing that on purpose so that I can create more layers here and a more rich color. But as you're starting to achieve the color that you want, you can start to use the tip of your pencil a little bit more and a sharpened tip to fill in the tooth and help get all that filled in and layered together nicely. Okay, so taking the white in here for a little bit more of a highlight again, just to kind of pull that out a little more. And I'm going to widen the area that I used the white on just a little bit, help lighten this top edge. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to the mulberry pencil and put a layer over all of this again. I'm going to switch the way I'm holding this mulberry pencil and go ahead and try to start filling in a little bit of the tooth of the paper here. Sharpen up the edges a little bit. And just get a little more of this lighter toned purple down, and it's a more kind of a red violet than some of the other purples we've been using. Okay. And then next I'm going to do another layer of the process red. And again using the tip of the pencil more. You're going to carry that color down to the darker side of this part of the orchid as well. Okay, and I'm going to compare kind of where I'm at color-wise with some of the orchids I've done previously to make sure we're kind of on track here and not doing something that's going to stand out and not mix well with what's done before. So I think we're looking pretty good. So I'm going to take some more white onto this highlight here on the top edge. And I think I'm going to go back and use the deep fuchsia again from the Derwent Color Soft. And then another layer of yellow over our shadowed portion. That's the Deco Yellow. And then looking for the Dahlia Purple. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and use some of that here on the top. Okay. My white's hiding down here in the bottom of the pencil cup. Sorry about that. Okay, so another layer of white on the top, and I'm going to start to lighten this color a little bit as we've done previously here on this orchid. Okay, and I think I'm going to take a little bit of this process red back in here as it's feeling a bit more of a coolish tone that I'm looking for. So I'm going to try to warm it up a little bit with this process red. That's looking better. More of what I was going for there. Okay. And I'm going to work on the shadow just a little bit more there. So I'm going to start with the dark purple. To make a little bit more of a contrast here. mix a little black grape down here at the bottom, just to kind of emphasize that a little bit more. Okay. Now I also had on hand this Indian Throne blue that, had I needed to make that shadow any darker, I could have also worked in this darker blue, which is a nice help in creating shadow. So just something to keep in mind for the future. If you run into a shadow you're struggling to get a little darker. Okay, and I think we need just a little more of a warmer purple tone here on the top. So I'm going to get the Dahlia purple one more time. Okay. And I think I'll take the white back in there, brighten up the highlight just a little more. And then I think I'll leave it there. I can always come back and adjust it a little more later if I decide I need to, after I've kind of lived with it for a little bit. But that's basically the process that I'll be repeating on these other purple petals here. And then here in the center, where we've got these dark shadows and the cream tones kind of mix in with the purples, we'll be doing a lot of layering of complementary colors together there. Layering again the purple and the yellow in this case as the complementary colors to get those nice shadow tones to come out. So we'll go back to the time-elapse part of the video now, so we don't take up too much of your time, but hope this has been a little bit helpful to you. And here we go. Let's get this orchid all finished up. Okay, so I think the colors on my orchid are pretty well set the way I want them to go, and I'm really pleased with where we're at so far on the drawing. The only step that's left, it would be to use a colorless blender on this flower to push the pigments together and give it kind of a shiny look and finish filling in the surface of the paper. I usually use Prismacolor's colorless blender for that. However, I like to wait until my drawings are completely finished, because when you use a colorless blender to mash those pigments together, it ruins the tooth of the paper, and so it makes it really hard to go back in and make any adjustments if you need to. However, I think that the purple parts of this orchid are pretty well set, and I don't imagine I'm going to have to make any changes to those, so I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate for you just a little bit here on the purple parts of the orchid on how to use a colorless blender. Now, I do have a separate video solely on how to use a colorless blender, so do check that out if you're interested. But basically, you want to just make sure that the tip of your colorless blender is nice and clean so that you don't smudge anything or contaminate any light colors with a darker one that might happen to be on the tip of your blender. Now, I like to use just a little pencil guard with mine. Helps ease the pressure on my fingers just a little bit, especially when I'm doing a lot of colorless blending at the very end of a drawing. But you're going to press really hard. We're still going to do the tight circular motions that we've been doing, okay? And I'm still going to use this paper towel to protect my drawing from any smudges that my hand might make. Hold it nice and straight up, you know, get a nice sharp point on it, and you're just going to move again in that circular motion and push those pigments together. You're pressing pretty firmly at this point. So, you know, earlier when we talked about, you know, the difference between a whisper and a shout with your pencil, at this point you want to be pretty close to shouting and pushing pretty firmly. Try to get a nice clean edge there if you can. And the thing that I like about colorless blenders is it really doesn't change the color that you have on your paper. You could do this process with a regular colored pencil, like a white or a purple or whatever you choose, but that will change the color that you've worked so hard to get. So that's why I really prefer the colorless blender to do this burnishing process. Now you can see it's filling in the white spaces of the paper there, which is the remainder of the tooth of the paper, and again, it mashes the tooth of the paper together. It intensifies the color just a little bit, but really no fundamental changes to what you've got there on paper. Now I'm going to leave the white petals alone on this because I don't want to accidentally smudge one of the veins in those white petals. And you really don't see too much of the tooth of the paper showing there anyway because it's such a light color, so I think we'll leave that and be just fine. Try to smooth out my edge just a little bit there. These colored pencils are so soft, which is really great, but it's hard to get kind of a clean edge on those. So I like to try to use the colorless blender to help clean up that edge a little bit. I also use Prismacolor's Very Thin pencils to help sharpen up the edges sometimes as well. Okay, so we just brush off any of that excess colored pencil there. And we are pretty well finished with the colorless blending on that little section of the orchid. So the rest of it I'm going to save until I finish the rest of my drawing. So that's the process I use to create an orchid out of colored pencil. I sure hope that you've enjoyed my video and that it's been helpful to you in some way on your artistic journey. Sure, thank you for taking time out of your day to spend with me. Would love for you to share my video with other people that you think might be interested, and do be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you can catch my next video. Thanks again for joining me, and until we meet again, God's blessings to you and happy drawing.